Hi, my name is Alice. I'm 21 years old. Have you ever felt that your fears are not taken seriously? Do they laugh, tell you to let it go, or take it easy? I've been there. Watch this video to the end and you will find out how I almost boiled myself alive for fear of germs. I was suspicious and anxious since childhood, and this was a favorite cause for worry in my family. My fears just strained everyone, and my friends just made fun of it all. So I honestly didn't have many friends. I started dating with my friend when I was sure he wouldn't give me an unwashed apple for a joke. I was a terrible hypochondriac then, and I always was afraid of catching something. I learned that he never forgot to take antibacterial wipes with him, and I realized this was my hero. The main problem started with the usual seasonal cold. Several of my friends got sick at once, and then they treated complications for a long time. And I always followed hygiene and immediately thought, of course, I'm clean. Now, can you make a joke about me wiping my phone with napkins? My parents laughed at me and took it as a quirk. Family friends sometimes jokingly suggested that I buy more soap myself and replenish the family's supplies. Some friends, noticing my problem, began to reason with me. They explained that washing hands so often, you wash away the natural protection of the skin. But they were no doctors or specialists. When my parents sided with the advisors, we had our first serious argument. I searched the internet, but there I found only proofs of my rightness. I did not believe the articles that contradicted me. They were not convincing enough. You probably don't believe everything that is written on the internet, do you? In those days, I still managed to control myself. I just constantly felt like I didn't wash my hands well enough. I started thinking, just because I washed my hands didn't mean that everything was okay. But what about the rest of the arm? Because there could also be some kind of infection and it would easily move to a clean one. I started washing my forearms and carried paper towels and wet wipes to class. I asked to go to the bathroom right during class to wash my hands. My hands began to become inflamed, then dry and crack. I kept washing them, then drying them, then washing them, wiping them just in case, and then washing them again. I came earlier for half an hour to any place. To college, to a part-time job, to a cafe. I needed to wipe everything down with antiseptic. The journey from home to college took a long time. I couldn't walk into public transport and take hold of a handrail. It seemed to me that everything was covered with germs. I decided to take hold of all handrails with wet wipes. Sometimes I couldn't get on a subway at all, and then my boyfriend would have to give me a ride. My parents sounded the alarm when I decided to take a year off and slow things down with part-time work and one very promising internship. I didn't want to go to a therapist. It seemed to me that my family was exaggerating, and it was simple enough to listen to me and better wash all the door handles. Then I would calm down and be able to study and lead a normal life again. My parents were worried and prohibited me to wash my hands. I even listened to them for a while, but my condition returned to panic attacks due to the fact that the sheet on the bed was already lying the second day, and there was probably a lot of germs. I tried not to pay attention to my fears and soothe myself with careful cleaning. Until one day on TV, they showed a story about the Middle Ages, the plague, and the rats. I so vividly imagined all this dirt and unsanitary conditions, cockroaches, bed bugs, that I just didn't remember what happened next. I came to my senses in the bathroom, where I scratched my hands into blood. My parents were scared and demanded that I go to the doctor, but at the same time, I thought they were just making fun of me. They saw for themselves what horrors began because people did not wash their hands enough. I got into a fight with them, threw some things in my bag, and ran off to live with my boyfriend. My boyfriend supported me. We talked and decided that there was nothing wrong with cleanliness. While he did not represent the full scale of my problem, He had never lived with me before, and he had never seen me shaking from dirty cup and having to wash it with my own hands. And I didn't show him my scratches. Yes, I was lying to him. What would you do if you were me? My life was just getting better. I spent 2 days in turtlenecks in the heat and went to the grocery store while my boyfriend was gone. I wore disposable gloves to touch door handles, money, and other things that I thought were most dangerous. Everything was fine. We were happy. And then I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night, gasping for breath. I thought it was a panic attack. I suddenly realized that we were lying next to each other. Each of us had a lot of bacteria, and we exchanged all this when we kissed, and not only... I ran to the bathroom. The plan matured instantly. I took water, brought all the detergents that were at home, and began randomly pouring them into the water. No damn microbe would have survived in a cocktail like this. My boyfriend pulled me out of the water when I was almost in it. My skin was peeling from the chemical burn, but he didn't swear or panic. I decided that if I was overreacting, it was only a little. A couple of days later, a friend of mine appeared. I had already stopped communicating with many people because of taunts and hints to go to the doctor, but then she asked to accompany her to a doctor. I agreed. After all, disagreements in the cleanliness of a table in a cafe were not a reason to ruin a friendship. My boyfriend offered to give us a ride. When we arrived, it turned out that we had an appointment with a psychotherapist and that I was the patient here, and they had done the whole plan behind my back. I was terribly upset. I got into a fight with them. My friends screamed that they wanted the best, and I didn't want to listen to anything. My boyfriend got down on his knees right in the middle of the corridor and promised to propose to me if I went to a therapist right now. My friend burst into tears, and for some reason, I started laughing. Security came running, and we tried to convince everyone that everything was all right. Of course, we didn't look like people who had everything in order. By some miracle, they assured me that once we arrived, there would be no harm in one visit, especially if everything was all right with me. I would just prove to everyone. I thought that since everyone was so eager to send me to treatment, I would go in and find out that I was all right. The therapist readily agreed with me. We decided that germs were a serious problem. I decided that common sense trumped over medieval disregard for hygiene, and we agreed to meet in a week's time. At home, I began to argue with my boyfriend. I told him that he had thought I was crazy and tricked me into going to the hospital. I was fine, and even the therapist agreed with me. He didn't say anything to me and left the house. I was left alone and furiously scrubbed the entire apartment with bleach. I knew there were germs everywhere. I washed and washed until I remembered that I had already washed the floors this morning. I realized I was doing this for the second time that day. I saw my hands. They were red, and no gloves had helped. I had burns on my palms from some cleaning products I had poured into the bathroom. I saw it all, sat down on the wet floor, and burst into tears. I was shaking and sick with hysteria, and I was howling so hard I couldn't speak. For the first time in months, I was afraid of myself and what might happen next. How soon would I decide that I needed to take off and wash my skin or drink a pipe cleaner to kill the germs inside? It was awful. In the end, I agreed to see a therapist. After that, I made up with my parents, and my friend helped me move things to my boyfriend's. I decided that I would return to university as soon as I finished therapy. Wipes are still the best invention of mankind, but now I use them less and less and only take a shower once a day. I'm glad my problem was taken seriously when even I refused to admit it, and I try to be sensitive to the other people around me. After all, who knows what kind of bats can live in Belfry? Did you like this story? Put a like, and YouTube will show it to other viewers. Subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss new videos. And don't forget to be friends with your bats. Hi, I'm Nikki, and I'm 17. Do you like to comb your hair, braid it, do a ponytail, maybe a haircut or color? Lucky you, because I can't do any of it. I don't have any hair at all. How did this happen? No, I didn't face cancer, and I wasn't shaved by aliens, and I never served in the army. It was a terrible accident at school. Let's start from the beginning. I was never too popular. You know, there's always that invisible kid in the school that no one would invite to a party, ever. Well, here I am, the lucky one. There are pros and cons in being unseen. You know, like, I can say hello to someone, and they would just look through me in response. I am always ignored, all by myself, surrounded by books instead of real people. I even used to like it until the day that changed my whole life. By the end of first semester, I signed up for an advanced course in chemistry. I was always interested in it. I wanted to be a doctor. I still want to, and I will be. So once we had a practical lesson, a whole 45 minutes alone with reagents, flasks, a huge distiller, and 2 noisy classmates. Mr. Anderson, our teacher, was so tired of listening to their stupid jokes and trying to maintain classroom discipline that by the end, he just gave up and sat down with his eyes closed. Suddenly, Mr. Anderson got called to the director's office. What does your class look like when the teacher is gone? My class is a complete mayhem. The chief bully, Dick Kennedy, immediately made a terrible fuss. He grabbed his test tube, filled with distilled water, and spilled it on the guy next to him. That one made a terrible face and began to hiss loudly. Well, of course, we had a whole lesson in acids, and Mr. Anderson showed us how to mix liquids so that caustic drops wouldn't scald our hands. For demonstration, he dipped a piece of apple into a bottle of hydrochloric acid and explained what happened in our stomach due to this very dissolution. Several test tubes were lined up on the teacher's desk. I knew that we all had water or weak alkali solutions in our test tubes. But I didn't like that the guys started to spray them and pretend to get burnt. They hissed and screamed louder and louder, and everything around us was wet. Our bags, our clothes, and the notebooks on our desks. I asked them to stop, but they did not pay any attention, and the teacher didn't come. And it did. Actually, at first, I felt that Dick, who was sitting behind me, throw something at his friend, but unfortunately, it hit me. Or maybe, fortunately, because if I hadn't been in its way, the acid would hit Francis right in his face. My hair got wet and my skin started to burn. Dick screamed in fear as he saw shreds of my hair fall on the floor. It was getting more and more painful, but I knew I shouldn't touch my head. Yes, I was incredibly scared, but the acid that burnt my skin almost did not hurt me. Almost. The teacher came in just as I started to scream. He looked at me and got scared too. Everyone was terrified. The back of my head was wet with blood. The school nurse came running. They calmed me down, washed my skin with a lot of water, then with alkali solution. There was almost no hair left. Some patches on my temple and forehead had to be removed because I looked like an elderly stand-up comedian. For the first week, I just couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I had never considered myself a beauty, but now that my once blonde hair was gone for good, every glance in the mirror hurt. I simply couldn't recognize that bald monster covered with the scaled burns. Mom and Dad even removed or covered all the mirrors in the house, especially for me. But it's impossible to hide from myself and other people forever. Dick tried to apologize several times, but I didn't feel strong enough to accept his apology. How could I forgive him? My mom and I went to the wig store when my wounds healed enough. We chose several wigs made of natural hair, an artificial one, and one with pink pigtails, one more simple, and one with bangs. I even had a little fun trying them on one by one. Ladies in the store kept telling me how good I looked, how pretty I was, but that couldn't bring my hair back. That day, I realized that I'm going to wear a wig for the rest of my life. Of course, if I don't want to embarrass others with my bald head. Have you ever wanted to hide in your room and never leave it? That was my only wish. But you can't hide out forever. I wasn't thrilled with the idea to put on my head a wig every morning. It looked so unnatural. As time went on, I began to get used to it, but there was a new problem. As if there weren't enough already. Wearing this mop of hair, I felt sweaty and uncomfortable. It didn't hold well and bounced during sports, but I was too afraid to take it off. Soon, Dick stopped portraying remorse and began to bully everyone again. I tried my best to ignore him, but Dick acted like a total dick. I annoyed him, as if he blamed me for what had happened. How dare he behave like that? I felt awful, being dragged in these endless quarrels and shouting back. At least I became more self-confident after what happened. I felt like I had nothing to lose. Once he said that I could stop deceiving myself and others. He grabbed my wig and then just pulled it off in front of the whole class. I froze without my last layer of protection. Everyone stared at me so openly and viciously that my knees were trembling. And then Doris got up from her seat, although we never even spoke to each other. She just got up and came over to me, putting herself between me and Dick. She did so without a word, and without a single word, she held out her hand. She took the wig out of Dick's hand and slapped his face with it. Then the other girls stood up. They shielded me, looking down at Dick and shaking hands with me. I felt for the first time that I was not alone. It was amazing. Dick could not stand the silent pressure and left. He just stormed out of the class, slamming the door. I wanted to put my wig on. It was awkward to stand surrounded by my pretty classmates with my bald head. But Doris stopped me. "There's no need for such a beauty to wear someone else's hair," she said, and patted my shoulder. "This is your new style." I knew that I was different from other girls, but I still couldn't see any positives in it. Neither could I go on living as before. The more I tried to hide my baldness, the more awkward everyone felt, including me. That day, I went to Doris's house after school. She and her friends did some magic on me. They experimented with clothes and makeup. I didn't understand much of that fashion slang. Ha ha. What, a monster looked at me from the mirror? Well, my bald head was nothing comparing to what the girls painted on my face. No way! I washed it all off. But at home, I tried to put on my own makeup. I could no longer be mistaken for a mousy little thing. Bald with a pair of new earrings and bright makeup, I was a goddamn style icon. People paid me attention, yes, but I actually liked it. I owned that attention. I controlled it now. Less than a month later, Dick asked me to go to the prom with him. Yeah, forget it. I have already promised to go to the prom with the one who shaves his head. Let's see what happens. I'm going to be a doctor, maybe work in a burn center. And meantime, I post my brand new looks on Instagram. I think this is important, not only for me, but for everyone who has a difficulty accepting his or her unconventional appearance. If you enjoyed my story, please like it, and you will find many other cool ones on our channel. Don't forget to subscribe and push the bell to stay tuned. Have a good one.
Hi, my name is Alana. I'm 16. What are you proud of in your appearance? I am proud of my gorgeous hair. It would be a tragedy for me to lose it, but it happened. Watch this story to the end, and you will learn how I lost my hair but gained a loved one. I have a sister, Hannah, who is 15, but few people know about this because it is a real shame to have such a sister. She doesn't consider it necessary to look even a little cute. She has never gone to a party in her life. Of course, she never had a boyfriend, but she's smart. I mean, a complete nerd. So I try not to communicate with her in public and generally pretend that she does not exist. Will she understand my joy? I sent an application for the Miss 16 beauty contest, and I was accepted. This was the chance of my life. My friends helped me prepare. We came up with a cool outfit and an amazing event. The whole family came to support me, including Hannah. More people seemed to be looking at Hannah's ridiculous costume than at the stage. If someone realized that this scarecrow was my sister, I would be kicked out in disgrace. And here was the finale, me and some other girl. It was obvious to me, but the jury decided that we needed to complete another task. Oh my God, not this! Science quiz. It seemed I got into the Miss Nerd contest. I knew I was in trouble. Hannah knew all this for sure. I looked at her in despair. Hannah was sending me some signs. I tried to decipher them. It turned out so-so. And because of the stupid quiz, I lost the contest. Have you ever had an important mission go sour because of some stupid little thing? Write it in the comments how it happened. The world around me was suddenly gray and dark. Nothing pleased me. Hannah was babbling something. Just like an old grandmother, she said modern competitions were not only about beauty, but also about a harmonious, multifaceted personality. I asked as politely as I could for her to leave immediately. It's good that there are real friends in the world who came, comforted, told me what a terrible competitor I had. That's what I understand. A real support. I felt like I was coming to life. I even had the strength to find a new competition where I could be appreciated. But it turned out that geeks got in there too. The first stage was not a photo in the image or even a video of talents, but an essay on the topic external beauty is even more precious when it covers the internal. This phrase was invented by some Shakespeare. I googled him. Ugly, old, and bearded. Clearly, he did not understand anything about beauty. I spent 2 days without sleep or rest working on my essay. I even wrote the first line, but it didn't go any further. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Hannah brought me a cup of hot chocolate. I was so tired of this stupid essay that I even complained to Hannah, and she said she could help me. And in 2 hours, she wrote a huge text. There was everything that the jury might like. Something about ecology, something about world peace, and some other bullshit. Anyway, Hannah's essay received a high score and I was called to the next stage. In honor of my success, my friends threw a huge party. The day before, my mother called me aside and said that it would be nice to thank Hannah and call her too, but she would disgrace me there. Although, to be fair, she did help me. I told Hannah to come, but to dress decently so that I wouldn't have to blush for her. She promised me faithfully. I came to the party earlier. Hannah still had to go to the library. So I only found out about her arrival when I was asked to go see the horror show. She was standing in the doorway in the dress I was going to throw away with her curls straightened. One of the girls said she was like me if I had been a comedy character. Throughout the party, I tried not to meet Hannah or even be in the same room with her. I would have called my party a failure if it wasn't for Zach. He was my friend's brother, a very cute and awesome pitcher. At this party, we finally managed to communicate properly. I think he liked me too. Then, at the most crucial moment, Hannah barged into the room and demanded that I talk to her. Why were these smart people so crazy? I explained to her as best as I could that she was a little out of time, and she whined and ran home. What a relief. Zach was very cool, but it was time to go home. I already imagined what I would get from my parents for hurting my poor little sister. But everything was quiet at home. According to the folks' version, Hannah just left early so as not to oversleep for school. Here's the news. Hannah didn't go snitching. Why such a gift? However, she refused to explain anything to me. She ignored me. On the weekend, we went to see new furniture for our rooms. And we met Zach at the store. What a surprise! Hannah suddenly turned as red as a tomato at the sight of Zach. Why would that be? And when Zach asked me out, she stepped on my foot with all her might. When I howled, Hannah said in a sweet voice that our parents were waiting for us, so we should hurry. And she took me away from Zach. Am I so lucky? Or are your siblings also interfering with your personal life? Tell us in the comments if you have had this experience. For the second stage of the competition, it was necessary to prepare a musical number. I made up a great story. At the beginning of the number, I would have a high hairstyle with a lot of ribbons, like in the series about the French Queen. And in the middle of the song, I would let my hair down in one movement and it would fall over my shoulders. For the number, I needed a person who would stand in the wings and hand me the props. As luck would have it, none of my friends could. Suddenly, Hannah said that she would be happy to help me. Just before my number, I ran into the dressing room for a second and suddenly caught my hair on the hanger. What fool put it there? I was in the trap. Neither here nor there. In my desperation, I started screaming for help. Hannah came running. She tried to pull the hanger out of my hair, but it was stuck. Hannah said that she would have to cut the ribbons. It was a disaster, but I decided it was better than being tied to a hanger. I decided to change the number. I would go out immediately with my hair down. Hannah took a pair of scissors, and then I saw my own hair flying at my feet. I jerked to get out and pulled out a huge chunk of my hair. I felt my head. It was a nightmare. Creepy, shaggy, blunt bob. It was beyond repair. With such a nightmare on your head, you can't show yourself to people. I lunged at Hannah, but she dodged me. She started yelling at me, sobbing. It turned out that she had been in love with Zach for ages, and she was wildly jealous that Zach had chosen me over her, and she decided to take revenge. I ran away, and from this competition where I could only disgrace myself, and from damned Hannah. Of course, the hair couldn't be saved, but maybe I could still think of something. It would be better to wear a wig so that no one could see the horror on my head. But at home, another portion of the nightmare was waiting for me. Someone had already uploaded my photos from behind the scenes online, and under them, there were already a lot of comments with laughing and vomiting emoticons. One girl from our class, who I thought was my friend, had even done a meme. Your photo before and after walking through the trash. There were jokes in my DMs, such as whether I now worked as a scarecrow and whether I cut my hair with a lawnmower. Ha ha. I decided not to leave the house until my hair grew back. I sat there and hated myself. Everyone laughed at me and bullied me, like they did with Hannah. My God, it turned out that my sister experienced this every day. Poor Hannah. How strong she had to be that she didn't break. I cried because I was among those who bullied my sister. I ran to Hannah and begged her to forgive me. She apologized for her stupid outburst, but I thanked her. It wasn't until I lost my gorgeous hair that I could understand how my sister felt. I promised Hannah that I would help her become beautiful. We went shopping together and I helped her choose beautiful modern clothes. I taught her how to make up. I showed her that she could be absolutely beautiful, but not the way I was. Hannah was happy. And for the first time, I felt that I had done something good for someone close to me. And it was as good as winning the coolest beauty contest. Put a like if you like my story. Subscribe to the channel. There will be a lot more interesting stories here.
Hi, my name is Pamela. I'm 20 years old. Have you ever felt like a hothouse flower under the supervision of your parents? A vegetable locked inside four walls? Well, my parents made me a real plant. Watch until the end and you will find out how I slowly turned into a tree. Literally. As soon as I was born, my parents decided to lock me in the house. All because I have a very weak immune system. Even a common cold can end badly for me. So, my mother sat with me for days on end, never taking her eyes off me for a second. I felt like I was in prison. But soon the doctor strongly recommended that my parents send me to elementary school instead of homeschooling. Socialization could help my immunity, and my parents reluctantly agreed. God, how happy I was to be let out of the house. I dreamed of finding friends and becoming the best student in my class. But on my first day of school, a sick boy came to class and sneezed on me. God, why didn't his stupid parents leave him at home? For some, it might have passed unnoticed, but in my case, this moment literally broke my life. I got sick, and I was ill for 3 months, with one successfully cured disease replaced by another. 3 months of torment, agony, and fever. And all the while, I was supported by the thought that I would soon be back at school. Have your dreams ever been shattered before your eyes? Have you received knocking down blows from fate? I was too young for this, and yet my suffering was over. I was discharged, but something worse than IVS and injections was waiting for me. My parents decided that I would no longer go to school and transferred me to homeschooling. They decided that the outside world is too dangerous for my body. I quickly realized that I couldn't win this war, and I accepted it. Resigned, but did not give up. I decided to devote myself to medicine to learn how to strengthen weak immune systems and finally get out of this prison. I studied hard, passed all the exams brilliantly, and most importantly, lulled my parents' vigilance. Yes, as a result of the exams, I was enrolled in a prestigious university for full-time medical faculty. But apparently, I was too early to be happy. After much argument, tears, and shouting, my parents let me go to school. But on the condition that my mother went with me. Every morning and evening, my mother drove me from our rented cottage to the university. And although I was constantly getting invitations to parties, listening to stories about them, and really wanted to go there, my mother would not listen to them. Several months passed. I continued to exist in the study home mode, and it would be better to live like this, but Dad got sick. My mother had to go to him, and for the first time in my life, I was left alone in the house. All the students saw that I came without my mother and began to ask questions. I just said I lived alone now, and we rented a nice big house with a garden and, of course, a swimming pool. The guys tried to persuade me to have a party. The attention turned my head, and I agreed. For the first time, I was responsible for my own life, and I decided to feel like an adult. An idiot. We danced, I tried alcohol, and had fun to the fullest. And I tried something else for the first time, if you know what I mean. To be honest, I don't remember his name, but I remember his strong hands and hot breath. He was very persistent and confident, just like a real prince from fairy tales. Well, I knew it was my chance, perhaps the only one. After all, my mother wouldn't let me set foot apart from her until the end of college. So I was easily persuaded. Well, and then, he turned my world upside down 3 times. This was my first and, as it turned out, my last party. After passing the exams, I returned home for the holidays, and as it turned out, forever. Have you done something that you thought was heroic, but it turned out to be stupidity? It all started with the fact that I found several dark spots on my body. Maybe someone else wouldn't be surprised. They would have blamed it on birthmarks or allergies, but I was trained to treat my health so carefully. I looked at the stains as carefully as I could, even scratched them, hoping they were dirt. It looked like it was a gift from the crazy party. Imagining how this would turn out, I decided not to tell my parents about it and wait for my return to the university. Every day, the spots became darker, swollen, hardened, and constantly itched. After a couple of days, the spots turned into growths. I started cauterizing them, but it didn't help. Then I decided to act radically. I locked myself in the bathroom, got my nail clippers, antiseptic, and bandages, and prepared for the operation. I braced myself, picked up the wire cutters, grabbed the growth on my body, and, with one sharp movement, cut it off. I bit my tongue hard from the pain. Blood gushed from the wound and my eyes went all blurry, but I still had a lot of work to do. Growth after growth through pain and tears, but I cut them all off. After a couple of days, there were more spots on my body, and the growths began to grow faster. And in the morning, when I looked in the mirror, I almost screamed with horror. One of them popped out on my face. With difficulty, I cut it off, and I found a whole cluster of growths on my hip. I decided to deal with them later. Too much pain at one time. My parents noticed the wound, but I convinced them it was just a pimple that wasn't worth worrying about. The next morning, several more growths popped out on my face. I cut them all down, one by one. My face was covered in blood. But when I cauterized the wounds, that's when I really felt hellish pain. I couldn't convince my parents not to worry again. So they took me to the doctor. With some difficulty, I persuaded my mother not to come into the office with me. And when I was alone with the doctor, I told him all about the party and what I had done there. When the doctor saw what had grown on my hip and on my body, he could barely contain his nausea. It looked just awful, as if the warts that had grown on each other had formed a small branch from which pus was oozing. A series of tests began. As I thought, I did get infected at that party. It turned out that it was quite an ordinary papillomavirus, which is present in 70% of the population. But because of my immune system, the virus activated a rare genetic condition called Lewandowski and Lutz dysplasia, which one of my distant ancestors had. And due to the fact that I did not ask for help from the very beginning and independently removed the growths, the already difficult situation worsened at times. The doctor performed a very painful operation. I was drugged with painkillers, but despite this, I woke up several times during the operation, screaming in pain. The operation was successful, but neither this nor the most powerful medications helped. A month later, everything began to grow back. The doctor forbade the operation to be performed more often than once a year, which meant that by the end of the year, I was a walking tree. I was again transferred to homeschooling, and I began to delve into the study of my disease. My research papers are rated top marks, and everyone predicts a great future for me. But what's the point of it if I can't leave the house most of the time? But my parents and I have found a common language, and I can do anything. The operation is only once a year, and the growths grow quickly, so my parents have achieved their goal. I still became their home plant. However, I will never give up until I find a cure for my illness. Have you ever had a time when you were locked up and still didn't give up? Tell us about this in the comments. And also, subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss other stories.
Hi, my name is Helen. I'm 18 years old. Have you ever been self-conscious about your appearance? About braces or hidden protruding ears? Well, my situation is much sadder because I have no teeth at all. And because of this, everything in my love life was also sad. Watch this video to the end and find out if it's possible to be happy even with a problem like mine. I lost the genetic lottery and was born with a rare congenital condition, complete edentullism. My teeth just never grew. It sounds scary, but I try not to despair. When you are deprived of something from birth, it is easier to bear the loss because you have nothing to compare it with. I don't know what it's like to live without trying to prove to everyone around you that you're not a monster. How to smile without embarrassment, despite the fact that I still have teeth, even though they're false. The doctor said that implants are a contraindication for a growing body. So until I'm fully grown, I have to wear false teeth. Yes, I know, it's tough. But I'm really just a normal teenager. I recently graduated from high school and went to college. This was a great achievement for me. My family believes that I have a great future ahead of me. I hope to start my life again, in a place where no one knows about my problem, to find new friends, and finally meet my first love. Have you met your first love yet? How did this happen? Or are you still searching? I went to college with hope for a better life and interesting acquaintances. Perhaps I would finally even meet my love. However, I had prosthetic dentures with me, which were already pretty shabby and terribly uncomfortable. They needed to be changed often, especially when you're growing up, but the process is long and expensive. So while I'm waiting in line for new teeth, I have to make do with what I have. I decided not to linger in the dining room. I didn't want to draw attention to myself or answer tactless questions. So I spent my first lunch at college under the stairs, next to the janitor's room. One of them caught me at the most awkward moment when I was removing my dentures. It was so embarrassing at first, but he didn't seem to notice. By the way, his name is Sam, and he had apparently tamed the local cat. He promised to show it to me sometime. In general, it was not the worst first day, but having only one acquaintance who was a janitor was somehow not enough. So my neighbor showed me a dating app that looked for guys nearby. I decided to install it myself. New acquaintances would be very useful. I could make friends with someone and maybe more. So I used it. If only I knew how it would turn out. First, there was John, a nice guy with lovely curls. He couldn't have found a better place to go on a date than a pizza place. It wasn't his fault. He didn't know I was special. I turned down pizza and settled for a milkshake. Later, John gave me a piece of candy. I thought it was just a lollipop, but the candy was chewy and got stuck to my teeth. Heck, my mouth couldn't open, and then I couldn't respond to John's questions. I mumbled something and tried to run to the bathroom, and he thought I was having a stroke and started calling for a doctor. I couldn't let him and shouted no, and the upper teeth just came loose. So John quickly ran off. Then there was William, very handsome and a well-read guy, just a dream. We went to an amusement park. Everything was just fine until William took me on a roller coaster. And by the way, I am a coward. As it turns out though, not without reason, but we will get to that. Anyway, we were rushing in this car at a monstrous speed, and then the rails in front of us went down steeply. I screamed in fear, and my jaw flew out of my mouth in front of me. Luckily, I caught it. Of course, William noticed, and I will never forget his face. William fainted at the sight of it. Seriously, he just passed out. I had to call an ambulance and take him to the hospital. It was only there that William regained consciousness. I thought I'd killed the guy. The nominee for the Worst Date in the World award is me. Needless to say, there was no second date with any of the guys. So much for a new life. When I came to college the next day, I immediately noticed that all the students were looking at me and giggling behind my back. It was like going back to school. And then I saw John standing by the schedule. Damn it! Was he studying with me? How could I have made such a mistake? I held on like grim death. But after someone shouted, "Hey, Toothless, smile!" I just fell apart and ran under the stairs. I just burst into tears. Have you ever faced public humiliation? How did you manage? I was sobbing. I was so hurt, like it was my fault that I was born this way. I thought school was the worst thing that could have happened. But no, it was worse now, because there was no one here who could understand me and calm me down. Someone interrupted my sobs by holding out a handkerchief. It was Sam, and a huge black cat was rubbing against his leg. Sam asked me what was wrong and if he could help me. Didn't he know what the whole college was talking about, or was he pretending not to offend me? Either way, I didn't tell him the reason for my tears. Sam introduced me to the local cat. They both managed to distract me from all this negativity. It seemed to me that if Sam had been prettier, not so floppy-eared and skinny, I might even have fallen in love with him, I guess. He was quite nice and interesting, read a lot, and always managed to make me laugh. In the evening, I received a message on the app from a guy who was very cute. He asked me out. To be honest, after all these stories, I didn't want to go anywhere, and the app only caused me negative emotions. But the guy was surprisingly persistent. My neighbor quickly picked up an outfit for me. So by some miracle, I was persuaded, come what may. The guy's name was Dylan. He was tall, slender, and very funny and interesting guy. Surprisingly, everything went well on the first date. He even said that he liked my smile. I decided to give these feelings a chance. And everything was in motion. The constant texting and calls. Dylan waited for me after classes almost every day to walk me home or go to the movies with me. We had been communicating very closely for 2 weeks now, and I decided to confess to him, tell him about my special feature. Dylan reacted calmly. He even asked me to show him. I hesitated for a long time, thinking that this would ruin everything, but in the end, he was able to convince me. Again, just like on our first date. So, I took off my dentures and showed him myself as I am. He said I had nothing to be ashamed of. I almost burst into tears from the rush of emotions. For so many years, I had struggled with the judgment, the constant ridicule, and finally, I was accepted for who I am. And then, he kissed me. I had probably never been so happy. I wanted to pinch myself to see if all this was happening for real. Everything was so wonderful. But the next day, Dylan was gone. I wrote to him, then called him. He didn't answer. I didn't know what to think. I was trying to reach him all weekend, but it was like he just disappeared. Was he busy or had something happened? I was driving myself crazy thinking about it. On Monday morning, there was a commotion at the college. Leaflets were scattered everywhere. They attracted the attention of the entire campus. They were viewed, photographed, and laughed at. I was curious about what it was, but then I saw Dylan, and John was with him too. Were they friends? No. They noticed me, and we were able to explain to each other everything about me. It turned out that John told Dylan about our date, and Dylan was interested. Like a kiss with a toothless girl was so unusual. He was just using me. I was disgusted with them and with myself. What a scoundrel! How could I buy it? And then, I noticed a leaflet in the hands of the guys, which they were laughing at along with the whole college. I was on them, smiling with my toothless mouth. What a nightmare! I felt my body go numb, and tears started to flow from my eyes. Everything else was a blur. I woke up under the stairs, with Sam holding me tightly round the shoulders. He tried to calm me down and said they were all stupid, self-centered fools. He was looking at me in a way that no one had ever looked at me before. It turned out that Sam had liked me for a long time. He found me on social network, liked my photos, and wrote me something. But I was so interested in others that I didn't even pay attention to his signs. The worst day of my life became the happiest because I finally found someone who didn't care about my appearance. I found someone who cared about me. Perhaps this meeting was worth all the ridicule I had endured. And you can subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any new stories.